The apartment across from mine was supposed to be empty, but every night at exactly 12:43, the lights turned on. No one ever walked down the hallway, no one used the stairs, and after the third night, I started waiting for it. I lived on the 4th floor of a pretty ordinary apartment building on the edge of downtown. It wasn't luxury, but it wasn't run down either. 4 floors, exterior brick, interior hallways, a laundry room on the 1st floor, and a keypad entry at the main entrance that almost never worked on the first try. I'd been there about a year when the tenant across from me moved out. I only knew because I saw the movers one Saturday morning carrying out furniture. Then, a few days later, the maintenance guys painting the door frame and changing the lock. After that, the apartment stayed dark and quiet. No packages, no footsteps, no TV through the wall. Nothing. Then, the lights started turning on. It was always the same pattern. First the entry light under the peephole glow. Then a warmer light farther inside. Probably the living room lamp or ceiling fixture. Just enough light slipped out from under the door and around the frame to tell the place was lit. The first night I noticed it, I figured maintenance was inside doing something late. The second night, same thing. The third night, I checked the time. 12:43 a.m. Exactly. That was the point where it stopped feeling routine. I work from home, and I tend to stay up later than I should. Most nights, around midnight, I'd be brushing my teeth, cleaning up the kitchen, or half watching something before bed. After I noticed the pattern, I started catching myself listening for it without meaning to. At 12:43, there would be a faint click from the other side of the hall. Then, the light. No voices, no footsteps coming up the stairs, no door opening. Just the apartment going from dark to looking occupied. I asked the neighbor at the end of the hall if someone had moved in without me noticing. She said no. Then, she lowered her voice and added, "You mean 4B?" I said yes. She told me she'd noticed the light too, but only when she came back from night shifts. She assumed management had someone using the unit for storage or office space. That explanation made sense, at least enough for me to stop thinking about it for a day or two. Then, I came home one Friday around 10 p.m. and saw a strip of clear tape across the edge of 4B's door frame. It was the kind of little trick you do without fully admitting to yourself why you're doing it. A thin piece of tape from the door to the frame, low enough that nobody would see it unless they were looking. I didn't put it there, but I definitely noticed it. At 12:43 that night, the lights came on again. The tape was broken the next morning. That changed things. The unit could still technically be empty and management could still technically be going in there late for some reason. But if that was the case, why not just say so? Why not mention inspections or repairs? So I went downstairs the next afternoon and asked the leasing office directly. The woman at the desk checked the system and told me 4B was still listed as vacant. She sounded bored, like she'd answered variations of the same question before. I said, "Then why are the lights on every night?" She paused. Not long, but enough that I noticed. Then, she gave me the most generic answer possible. Maintenance may be checking electrical fixtures. At midnight? I asked. She smiled like she wanted the conversation over. We've had contractors in and out. I asked if anyone was staying there temporarily. She said no. That should have been enough to let it go. It wasn't. That night, I stayed up on purpose with the hall camera app open on my phone. The building had one camera at each stairwell entrance on every floor. Nothing fancy, but enough to show who came up and down. The view didn't include my door directly, but it showed the hallway corner and both directions of traffic. At 12:37, no one had come up. At 12:43, the light under 4B's door turned on. No one had passed the stairwell camera. At 12:44, still no one. I rewound the footage twice. Nothing. Now I had something concrete. Not proof of anything dramatic, but proof that the lights were coming on without anyone approaching from the main hall. The next morning, I checked the unit more carefully while leaving for coffee. There were tiny scuffs near the bottom of the door, like something hard had scraped it more than once. Not kicks, lower than that. Parallel marks close together. A couple nights later, I was in bed reading when I heard something from across the hall for the first time. A drag. Short, slow, like a chair leg on carpet, but muted. Then another. Then, silence. The lights were already on. I got up and looked through my peephole. Nothing. Just the opposite door and the strip of warm light underneath it. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at the bottom of the door, waiting for a shadow to cross. Instead, the light inside 4B went out. Not all at once. First, the deeper light farther in the unit. Then, maybe 3 seconds later, the entry light. The hall went dark again. The next day, I taped a tiny piece of thread to the bottom edge of 4B's door, tucked it where it would drag if the door opened inward. It was stupid and nosy, but at that point I wanted something more than my own impressions. At 12:43, the lights came on. The thread was gone by morning. That weekend, I ran into the building super in the parking lot and asked him if anyone had keys to 4B besides the office. He said yes, maintenance and management both did. Then I asked if there was any other access to that unit. He looked at me for a second and said, "What do you mean?" I asked if there was a secondary entrance, attic access, roof hatch, anything. He shook his head, but not confidently. Then he said there used to be a connected crawl space between certain fourth-floor units for plumbing access years ago, but it had been closed off during renovations. That was the first explanation that actually made me feel sick. Not because it sounded supernatural. The opposite. Because it sounded practical. That night, I didn't wait in my apartment. I went downstairs at 12:30 and sat in my car where I could see the fourth-floor side windows. 4B faced the alley, and from the right angle, you could see part of its living room window through the trees. At 12:43, the window lit up. A minute later, I saw movement. Not clear enough to identify, just a shape passing once across the blinds. Human height, slow. Then, stillness. I went back upstairs immediately and checked the hallway. No one had used the stairs. The light was still on under 4B's door. I called the building's emergency maintenance number, mostly because I wanted another person there. The super answered, sounding irritated, until I said I thought someone was inside the vacant unit. That got him moving. He came up with a ring of keys and knocked on 4B twice before unlocking it. The apartment was empty. No furniture, no bags, no food, no signs anyone had been living there. But the living room light was on, and the closet door in the back bedroom stood open. The super went room to room, checked the bathroom, checked under the sink, then called me over to the bedroom closet. In the drywall, at floor level, was a square cutout panel. Not part of the original design. Homemade. He removed it and shined his flashlight in. There was a narrow service void between 4B and the neighboring unit's plumbing wall, maybe 2 feet wide in places, running the length of part of the apartment. Inside were a blanket, 2 empty water bottles, and a battery lantern. Whoever had been using it had taken everything else. The police came, took pictures, and treated it like a trespassing case. The building office acted shocked. Management claimed no one knew about the cutout panel. The super later told me quietly that he thought someone had probably been getting into the void from an unfinished maintenance access above the laundry room ceiling, and using the vacant unit only when the hall was quiet. That's probably what happened. Probably. But here's the part that still bothers me. A few days later, after they sealed the panel, replaced the lock again, and left 4B dark for the first time in weeks, I woke up in the middle of the night and looked at my phone. 12:43 a.m. And from somewhere inside the wall behind my bed, I heard the same slow dragging sound I'd heard from across the hall. Only this time, it was closer.